was a pretty good year for superhero movies and superhero toys. You gotta remember back around that time in 1989 that when a superhero movie came out, it was kind of a big deal, and it wasn't so much like today where it's a case of, oh boy, which one is it this time? No. When they came out, well, it was before my time, but people got excited then. Also, in 1989, Marvel movies were virtually non-existent, and if we did see a movie of some sort based on a Marvel property, it was probably a TV movie, or else it just sucked and was direct to video. And all the rights to Marvel characters were scattered all over Hollywood as they were trying to get their characters onto the silver screen. You see, Marvel's problem is that they weren't backed by a huge production company like they are now under Disney, whereas DC has been backed by Warner Brothers for 50 some odd years. So, it's a lot easier for DC, at least around that time, to get some big productions off the ground. Just for a frame of reference, back in the 80s, we only got 2 movies based on Marvel properties. One was The Punisher with Dolph Lundgren, which was direct-to-video. And honestly, it could have been a lot worse. It really could have been. It's not a great movie, but like I say, could have been a lot worse. And then the second one was Howard the Duck, which made up for any positive qualities the Punisher had at all, and just outright sucked. Anyway, all this shopping around of Marvel's IPs to various studios is why you have Sony making Spider-Man movies and Universal just sitting on the rights to Incredible Hulk movies, and not that long ago Fox was making X-Men and Fantastic Four movies, and ever since about 2008 Marvel released their own Iron Man movie, and they've been trying to regain those IPs ever since. So, unlike Marvel, DC's never had an issue with their characters being scattered all over the place. But getting a film about their properties off the ground is another matter. The first DC movie we saw under Warner Brothers ownership was Superman, which, against all odds, succeeded. It's literally the best adaptation of Superman ever. Superman media these days sucks. So, imagine 40 years ago, over 40 years ago, when they didn't really have computer graphics. They didn't have CGI and stuff. They had to use practical effects. Imagine the difficulty of recreating Superman's powers without CGI. Now, we're more than capable of putting Superman on the big screen these days, and yet we seem incapable of making an acceptable version of Superman. That's, wow. Looking back, it's incredible how Superman 1 and 2 hold up. There were 4 Superman movies, and the last 2, they were terrible. Oh, I remember watching Superman 3 for the first time, and just, boy, that left a taste. Yeah. Now, imagine the year after the unmitigated disaster that was Superman 4, Quest for Peace. Nuclear Man! Woof! You hear there's a Batman movie coming out. You might be a little skeptical, right? Well, yeah. Well, even despite a couple of stinkers, DC movies at the time were still heads and shoulders above Marvel movies, so, at least they had movies. Another area where DC excelled over Marvel was toys. Back in the mid-80s, DC had this line of action figures produced by Kenner called the Superpowers Collection, and it had just about every character that you could think of at the time. They were really pumping out these characters. And by comparison, Marvel had a line in the mid-80s called Marvel Secret Wars that was based around this limited series that they released called Secret Wars. It was literally produced to promote the action figures. Of course, it didn't really pan out because Yeah, Mattel only made about 1.5 lines worth of figures. Literally, they made one line of 8 figures. Next series contained 5. So it was kind of a dismal failure. In all honesty, though, the Secret Wars line was only a fraction of the size of the Superpowers collection. Looking back, I think it's got to be literally a third the size. That's how small the Secret Wars collection is compared to Superpowers. And the Marvel figures aren't anywhere near as nice as the Superpowers figures. They look terrible, frankly. It's nice to have them, but they're not good. Now, fast forward a few years here to 1989, and a couple of funny things happened. One, Batman became a summer blockbuster. And then two, Toy Biz scored the license to make DC superheroes, but also the Batman movie toys. Now chew on that for a second. Toy Biz, you know, the guys famous for pumping out so many Marvel action figures during the 90s and the mid 2000s. They were making DC superheroes. They got their start making DC superheroes in the Batman movie line. Wow. Toy Biz making DC toys kind of sounds like Bizarro World, but it's true. They got their start, literally their start. I tried looking for something that they did previous to this, but I couldn't find anything. I could not find anything. They were making all kinds of various stuff, and none of it was action figures or anything. So how they got the license, I don't know. But they got their start making DC superheroes in the Batman movie line. That is a trip. Oh my god. Their Batman movie line was unique. It was very closely tied to the DC superheroes line, featuring the same type of gold backing card setup and a newspaper cutout on the back of the card with a picture of the figure against a gravelly background. You know, except the Batman figures had this purple and gold theme instead of the red and yellow theme on the regular superheroes line, which I assume they went with because it looked good because of the Joker's colors, and also, you know, it kind of differentiated the Batman figures from the regular superheroes line. Something like that. When these toys were first released and you looked on the back of these things, they had the whole line listed. And DC superheroes didn't list Batman toys, and Batman didn't list DC superheroes toys. Yet because the cards looked so similar, when you looked at them, you thought they belonged to the same line. It's a whole big thing that I'm going to wait to get into because I really just want to focus on Batman today. Like the Batman figures that were produced for the movie. But that said, there's a lot to unpack surrounding Toy Biz's shenanigans. The first Batman figure released by Toy Biz was a weird one. He looked vaguely like the movie Batman, but he didn't look anything like Michael Keaton. In fact, Toy Biz couldn't decide what the hell they wanted Batman to look like, but it sure wasn't Michael Keaton. If you look at the back of Batman's box, you'll see that the prototype looked completely different. I mean, look at the boots, look at the cowl, everything looked different. It didn't even have the texture on the boots and gloves. Doesn't look anything like the movie Batman. Between the shape of the body and the head sculpt, when you look at the back of Batman's box and check out this figure, it's really obvious that they're using a repaint of the Superpowers Collection Batman, right? But here's the even weirder thing. They're not actually reusing a Superpowers Batman. What they did, Toy Biz, was they created their own figures that were pretty much direct copies of the Superpowers collection, and then they sold them. So in effect, they were bootlegging Superpowers collection action figures. Oh my god. So the Superpowers Batman was just a jumping off point for their own movie Batman figure. And then they added the details from the movie, and they added an action feature, and they added that cursed head sculpt. Oh, that head sculpt. Jesus wept at this bad boy. I don't know how many versions there were of this thing, but there were at least 4. There was one that looks like he had a shellfish allergy, one that looked like he got Botox injections, one that looked like a cosplay doofus, and another that looked like animated Batman's illegitimate son. None of them looked right. All the Toy Biz Batmans looked like half-cocked comic book versions of movie Batman. But you know what? Their bodies actually looked pretty decent. The details on the gauntlets and boots are there, and they were generous enough to include a batarang and a grappling gun. And the action feature was kinda cool, even though it tended to break a lot. This belt on Toy Biz Batman was the bane of my existence when I was playing with it as a kid. I went through so many of these guys. And, you know, there were a finite number of them. You couldn't exactly find these on trees at the time. So the fact that I went through so many of them was a little bit of a chore finding any new ones. Let's be honest. Almost all the Batmans I had from Toy Biz lost their utility belt, which was very, very sad. And I know that this action feature is supposed to be recreating all those scenes where Batman is grappling away and disappearing into the night like a creature of darkness and all that stuff. So I know what the point of the action feature is. It's just heartbreaking when, you know, your toy's action feature gives up the ghost. The trouble in paradise is that the knot on the string attached to Batman's belt either got loose very easily or else it broke very easily. And when that happened, the string attached to Batman quickly snapped into Batman's body, never to be seen again. Yeah, a lot of sad days playing with this guy. You know, if they were going to include this action feature, they probably should have included screws on his back so that we could open him up and feed his little rope back through the hole where his utility belt is. And that way we could reattach the action feature. But in reality, they probably figured, oh, hey, if we don't include screws on the back and this action feature breaks, we're going to be able to sell more figures. Which is a pretty neat idea until you realize, oh, our toys only got a shelf life of about a year before everything goes on clearance. Oops. I can't decide if Toy Biz's Batman is just lazy or amateurish or whatever, but it does make me wonder why did DC give them the license to make this toy? Like I said, Toy Biz literally didn't do anything before this. They didn't make action figures. I couldn't find anything. The only thing they really made was like children's toy bikes and stuff like that. Just, you know, just generic stuff like that. Nothing that would indicate, oh yeah, we can make action figures, no problem. No, I didn't find any of that. The only thing I can think of is that Toy Biz probably came cheap. And honestly, if you look at the agreement that they had with Marvel later on, you kind of get the vibe, yes, that seems to be the case. Literally a year after Toy Biz released their DC toys, the license was awarded to Kenner, who quickly released their own version of DC toys. And when you look at Toy Biz's offerings, it's really not hard to see why Kenner was awarded the license. I mean, you know, when you just take the Superpowers line and just repurpose it and do bootleg versions that don't look nearly as good, it's not gonna go well, I don't think. What were they thinking? Anyway, Kenner released their own line of movie Batman figures, and they called it the Dark Knight Collection. And it featured 2 characters, Batman and Joker. And this line is kind of notorious because it introduced the concept of many, many variations of Batman that are not exactly comic book accurate. So we got lots of different Batmans. We got a regular movie Batman. We got a couple of versions of that with different action features, which is kind of the norm these days. But back then they also included Batman with a gold suit, who happened to be Tech Shield Batman, and Batman with a blue suit that had this weird wall climbing grappling feature, and then another Batman that had a blue and gray color scheme that was kind of themed after the comic book version of Batman. And he came with, I don't even remember what he came with right now. They came with all kinds of weird things. They came with rocket launchers and wall scalers and wings and crazy accessories that, so, sometimes it didn't feel a lot like Batman. And I think that they just repurposed a lot of stuff from their other toy lines to make these. The other thing that's really notable about the Dark Knight collection is it included a very accurate head sculpt of Michael Keaton. And I kind of wish I could ask Michael Keaton right now how he felt seeing himself so accurately portrayed in this action figure, because it wasn't the most common thing back then, having a head sculpt on an action figure that looked more or less exactly like you. You notice pretty much immediately from Kenner's version of movie Batman that it is screen accurate, except for maybe the white soulless eyes, but whatever. Anyway, the figure is smaller in stature than Toy Biz's version. Alas, Michael Keaton was only of average height compared to comic Batman, who happens to be well over 6'2". But hey, you don't gotta be tall to be cool, Batman. Unlike Toy Biz's Batman, there were action figures scattered all across Kenner's versions of Batman, and these action features were not all movie related. Only maybe a couple of them were movie related. Like on one Batman figure, he's got a rocket launcher, which is kind of diametrically opposed to the Batman ethos. And instead of making a Batman figure with a very carefully chosen action feature, Kenner went completely off the rails with this line and made all kinds of crazy versions of Batman with a couple of movie accurate things. Like there's this one Batman that does a wing spread, like the one scene before he says, "I'm Batman" for the first time, which is kind of cool. And then you got Bruce Wayne changing into a costume, and that's pretty cool too. That's a really neat idea. But then there was a litany of stupid bullshit in this line that they kind of just threw at it, and I think they were trying to just get these figures out the door because, well, really, how long do you have to develop these figures before you gotta capitalize on the movie's popularity? I mean, there's a reason they only had 2 figures in the line. One, anyone who's buying the line only cares about Batman and Joker, so there's your 2 figures right there. Who's gonna buy a Vicky Vale figure, right? Who's gonna buy, what, Knox? What, we really need that Commissioner Gordon figure? Batman! Batman! God, we had so much Batman in this line. So much Batman. Many, many Batmans. And then we only had 2 Jokers. We had 2 Jokers. Can you believe that? 2 Jokers, and neither one of them were really accurate to the screen. The most accurate one that we got was Knockout Joker, because at least he had the pattern on his pants. But still, he had orange pants. Look at all the Batmans in the back of this box. It's crazy. What the fuck is Tech Wing Batman supposed to be from? What the fuck is a Tech Wing? The closest movie equivalents have to be Crime Attack Batman. Just because he looks like the movie Batman's supposed to. And then there's also Shadowing Batman, and Thunder Whip Batman, and Power Whip Batman, and Bruce Wayne Batman. Oh, God, there's so many Batmans! Oh, make another character, please! Oh, shit, make another Joker! There's only 2 of them! Only Shadowing Batman and Bruce Wayne Batman are even remotely anything like the movie with their action features. The ability to do the wing spread and change in the Batman is actually really cool, both of those features. But like I mentioned earlier, the other action features that you see on these Batmans are very, very obviously repurposed from other figures. Even though I don't know what they are, but I can't imagine why else they would put them on Batman here. I mean, look at this. Fire rockets and all this other stupid bullshit is too much. It's kind of fun. It's kind of fun, but having so many Batmans really oversaturated things and made you kind of wish they would just make somebody else and give you a break from all the Batmans. And this was kind of a constant theme throughout the time Kenner was handling all the Batman lines in the 90s, and they stopped around the late 90s, but yeah, it was really, really a lot of Batmans. It was nuts. Having so many Batmans, it lacks clarity for the line, and like I say, it's just something that plagued DC lines for years, and it even kind of creeped into the Marvel lines. Woof. I would have loved to have seen Kenner focus a little bit more on the action figures, and maybe if they had a little bit more time to make them, because I have to imagine time was a factor, right? Yeah, it probably was. Getting these figures out so they could capitalize on the movie and all that. But what I would have liked to see is, say, a Batman with a battering, throwing action feature. That just makes good sense to me. I mean, that's something we should probably have, right? Yeah. Batman with battering, throwing action feature just makes sense. And then maybe they could have redone the utility belt feature that Toy Biz included on their Batman and made it so that it was a little sturdier. I think that would have been really cool. Those would have made for some really cool variations on Batman that were more movie accurate. And in addition, maybe a couple of other guys from the movies, because, you know, Vicky Vale was a big part of the movie. She wasn't nothing. So having a figure of her would be nice. It would be nice to have. And then maybe another figure of Bob the Goon made by Kenner would have been cool too. Just to keep it fresh and make it feel like it's not so much Batman and Joker. I mean, there's barely any Joker. Barely. There's only 2 Joker figures as opposed to what? A dozen Batmans? Holy crap. God, Kenner, what are you doing? So which Batman toy would I hand it to? Looking at both the Kenner Batmans, I mean, I don't know which one to pick. Which one is the favorite one? I guess it's probably Crime Attack Batman because he looks like the most standard of Batmans, I guess. So do I hand it to Kenner's Batman or do I hand it to Toy Biz's Batman? And off the top of my head here, I kind of have to hand it to Toy Biz's Batman because it feels a lot more fun. It feels like it's more Batman-like than the Kenner figure. Even though the Kenner figure looks like Michael Keaton, still, there's an action feature on this Batman that makes you feel like, oh man, cool, Batman zipping away and stuff like that. So, yeah, I gotta hand it to them. They really focused in on what they wanted out of their Batman figure, and then they ran with it. Whereas it feels so scattershot with the Kenner figures that you wonder, what were they going for? It was weird. And, you know, looking at all these figures, do you really want all these weird Batmans? No, I just want Batman. I want the Batman I know and love. I don't want, you know, some Batman that was dreamed up in a boardroom by some guy who doesn't know the first thing about DC Comics. One of the other things that really helps out Toy Biz's Batman is that they had the good sense to include some really appropriate accessories, like this little battering here. This was awesome to have. This is one of the best things that they could have included. What a great little, just a simple little piece of plastic, and it's so much fun. You know, you don't need to make toys complicated. You just need to include appropriate accessories that belong to the character that you're trying to represent. And it even included a grappling gun. It didn't do anything, but still you could pretend. And Batman was grappling away, and then away he went with his action feature on his belt. Zip. Yeah. So it's nice to focus and create definitive versions of these figures. The Toy Biz figure had more articulation too. It had knees that bent, whereas the Kenner figure feels really stiff. His legs are locked out. He Only has 5 points of articulation. It feels a little bit like a statue. So the playability, again, it's gotta go to Toy Biz on this one. I can't believe I'm giving it to Toy Biz here, but the Toy Biz toy is a lot of fun. And that's really what you look for in a toy, right? Anyway, guys, check me out on Twitch. I stream Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you want to see more of my content here, if you support what I do, consider subscribing today. Anyway, I'll be back soon with some more some more memories and reviews like this, where we're gonna find all these toys, we're gonna dig up all these jewels of the past, and we're gonna sort it all out one way or another, you know? Thanks for joining me today, my friends. I'll be back again real soon. Till next time, with love from me to you. Bye-bye.